An exceptional agent needs an exceptional sidearm, and an exceptional sidearm can only be crafted by an exceptional gunsmith. The Silver Ghost is Leon's starting weapon in Resident Evil 4, as well as his sole weapon, since while he can acquire a veritable arsenal from the merchant, his trusty sidearm is pretty much the only weapon he wields in cutscenes. Thus it is his canonical weapon. However, it does not bear the name Silver Ghost in-game, nor is this name present or mentioned anywhere in the game. Instead, it was simply called Handgun. A creative designation, to say the least. Though to be fair, this level of creativity can be found in most of the other weapons in the game. The name Silver Ghost actually originated from the January 2006 issue of the ARMS or ARMS magazine, a monthly Japanese airsoft aficionado magazine. Said issue had an article in it about a custom airsoft replica of Leon's handgun, alongside a story about how Leon created the pistol alongside Joseph Kendo, the talented gunsmith who also designed the custom Samurai Edge handguns for the Raccoon City Police Department's STARS unit. In said story, Leon himself gives his new pistol the name Silver Ghost, in reference to both its finish and his current condition, which he described as a spirit pulled out from his body, a ghost. The story, while written by the staff and based on interviews with Resident Evil's weapons designer Ryomura Yoshin, who was also responsible for designing weapons for other Capcom game series, namely Devil May Cry and Dino Crisis, was supposedly entirely unofficial, though some facts from it were apparently official, since in the game, the slide of the pistol has Kendo Custom Shop marked on it, meaning that the weapon was indeed custom built by Joseph Kendo. So perhaps the story in the article is not entirely fictional. Maybe even the name Silver Ghost itself is in fact the actual name of the weapon, given to it by Ryomura Yoshin, the one who designed it. Though this begs the question of why was this name not used in-game. Given the date of the issue that features the story, perhaps the name was conceived after the game was launched, though even later releases/remasters omitted the name. But regardless of whether the name is official or not, it still stuck to the weapon. It became the way fans refer to it, which is understandable since it is a mite more imaginative than just handgun. Plus, it's a more direct and clear way of referring to Leon's iconic custom sidearm, given that handgun can refer to any pistol. Just like the game is vague with the weapon's name, it is also vague with its description, since it simply describes the weapon as a standard 9mm handgun. This reveals nothing about it other than its caliber, 9x19mm Parabellum, the NATO standard pistol cartridge, and a common cartridge for a modern semi-automatic pistol. Design-wise, the Silver Ghost is a fictional pistol, though one that borrows from reality. Specifically, It is an amalgamation of 3 real-life pistols. The Heckler and the Koch USP-9 Tactical, from which it takes its threaded barrel, trigger, frame, and slide stop. The Smith & Wesson Sigma, from which it gets its slide, magazine well, and magazine, and the Ruger P85, from which it inherits its external hammer, grips with horizontal serrations, and iron sights. Curiously, this last pistol is part of the same family as the Ruger KP94, which was Leon's original sidearm in the initial build of Resident Evil 4, back when it basically was an entirely different game. So the Silver Ghost can be considered a spiritual successor to the handgun Leon was originally supposed to wield. The Frankensteinian nature of the Silver Ghost can be attributed in real life to Ryomura Joshin wanting to create a unique weapon for Leon to wield, and in-game to Kendo and Leon taking the best elements from some of the best 9mm pistols around in order to create the perfect handgun, a masterpiece for Leon to use for such a significant mission. According to the story I mentioned earlier, Leon rejected Kendo's initial idea to just give him a Samurai Edge, which is likely why they had to get creative. In terms of stats, the Silver Ghost is a decent, well-rounded handgun that does not excel at any one thing. It trails at least one other pistol in every stat category, but it is not bottom of the pack either, thus making it a jack of all trades, master of none. It does, however, have its unique exclusive upgrade, which grants it a 5 times critical hit rate for headshots, meaning that when fully upgraded, it rewards a skilled hand. Plus, with fine aim, it can make up for its lesser damage when compared to some of its peers. All in all, it's a reliable choice that you really cannot go wrong with. Like I stated at the beginning, Leon uses the Silver Ghost for the entirety of Resident Evil 4. Though oddly enough, he does not use it in Mercenaries. Instead, he uses the Springfield XD, called Blacktail in-game. However, the Silver Ghost does appear in Mercenaries, in the hands of none other than Albert Wesker. And his is special, since it takes advantage of the pistol's threaded barrel borrowed from the USP-9 Tactical to mount a Knight's Armament suppressor. Wesker would go on to use the Silver Ghost in Resident Evil The Umbrella Chronicles, which was released 2 years after Resident Evil 4, though it is set 1 year before it. The new material it features, that is. Quite how Wesker managed to get his hands on a handgun tailor-made for Leon specifically, and before Leon himself would get to use it, remains a mystery. My guess is that they wanted Wesker to use a unique weapon in Mercenaries, and instead of adding to the game a weapon just for him, like say his Samurai Edge, they opted to give him the most distinctive handgun in the game, made even more special by giving it a suppressor. There is, however, no explanation for why he uses it in Umbrella Chronicles as well. especially considering that it takes place before Resident Evil 4, which is when Leon uses the pistol for the first time. Reusing assets is perhaps the only explanation. Now it is worth mentioning that originally, Leon was meant to also have a suppressor for his Silver Ghost, but this was cut from the game for unknown reasons. Perhaps they did not want to make the game easier by allowing you to take out enemies quietly from a distance. So, in the end, the Silver Ghost was an integral part of Resident Evil 4 that saw frequent use, and it remains an iconic part of the game. Unfortunately though, canonically, Resident Evil 4 is the last game where the Silver Ghost appears. The weapon would go on to appear in the Umbrella Chronicles, which was released after, but it takes place earlier. It was also seen in early builds of Resident Evil 5, but since there is no trace of it in the full game, it was likely just a placeholder used in the initial stages of development. Therefore, Resident Evil 4 is the last game in the timeline where the Silver Ghost is seen. However, it is not the last time we see it within the timeline. Released in 2008, Resident Evil Degeneration was the first CGI Resident Evil movie. Taking place 1 year after the events of Resident Evil 4, the film is canon to the main series of games. In this film, Leon appears, and he once again wields the Silver Ghost as his main sidearm, though this time it is equipped with a flashlight instead of a laser sight. Such a change necessitated by the nature of his mission in the film, which takes place in the darkened corridors of an airport besieged by the undead. During said mission, Claire Redfield gets to use the Silver Ghost when Leon tosses it to her during a critical moment, forcing him to briefly use a Glock 26 that he keeps as a backup. After dealing with the impending threat, Claire returns the Silver Ghost to Leon, who proceeds to use it for the rest of the film. Degeneration marks the last canonical appearance of the Silver Ghost in the series, since while its wielder would return several times, his trusty sidearm would not. Leon would return in Resident Evil Damnation. Released in 2012, it is the second CGI film in the series, a sequel to Degeneration, and it takes place in 2011, 6 years after the events of Degeneration and 7 years after the events of Resident Evil 4. In this film, Leon's sidearm is a Springfield Armory TRP operator, equipped with a flashlight. Leon would then go on to appear in Resident Evil 6, which was also released in 2012, though it takes place after the events of Damnation. In this game, Leon goes back to his classic and OG sidearm, the Heckler & Koch BP-70, this time called Wing Shooter instead of Matilda, and taking elements from both the Walther P5 and the Walther P99 QA or Quick Action. Leon would go on to appear one last time in the timeline, excluding the upcoming Resident Evil Death Island, in the third CGI film Resident Evil Vendetta, released in 2017 and taking place after Resident Evil 6. In this film, Leon's sidearm is the Sentinel-9, a custom Sig Sauer P226 beaver tail made specifically for DSO members. Interestingly, it seems that the Sentinel-9 was supposed to be Leon's sidearm in Resident Evil 6, though it was cut for unknown reasons. So it wouldn't be until the remake of Resident Evil 4 in 2023 that the Sentinel-9 would get to appear in a game. And even then, it is only available as DLC or as part of the deluxe or collector's editions of the game. While Degeneration was the last point in the timeline where the Silver Ghost was seen, the weapon would get to return once more in the remake of the game where it first appeared, though it would do so with a different name and a different form. In the remake of Resident Evil 4, which again was released in 2023, Leon's sidearm is no longer simply called the Handgun. Instead, it is designated as the SG-09R. SG likely stands for Silver Ghost, thus acknowledging that the unofficial name for the original pistol might not be that unofficial after all. The 09 probably refers to the weapon's caliber, which is still 9x19mm parabellum. The meaning of the R is less clear, but I think that it might stand for rail, referring to the Picatinny rail the pistol has in its frame, which it uses to mount the laser sight. An R in a weapon's designation often denotes that the weapon has some sort of rail system, especially when said weapon has a variant that does not have such a system, and thus does not have an R in its designation. Plus, the original Silver Ghost had its laser attached via a mount that was clamped onto the frame. It did not have an accessory rail to mount the laser onto in a traditional way. So it makes sense that such an obvious addition to the weapon's new form would be made clear in its new designation. In terms of design, the SG-09R is not a fictional weapon derived from several real ones like its previous incarnation was. Instead, it is based entirely on a real pistol, the Heckler & Koch USP-9, whose tactical variant is one of the pistols that the original Silver Ghost borrowed from, meaning that the SG-09R shares some DNA with its predecessor. However, the SG-09R is not just a plain old USP-9. Instead, it is notably customized just like its previous incarnation was. The SG-09R features a custom grip with finger grooves and a checkering pattern, and a compensator that seems to be integrated to the frame, which is longer than normal. The pistol's front sight is attached to said compensator instead of the slide, with a plug filling in the gap where the front sight would normally be. The SG-09R's description, which is not vague like its predecessor's description was, states that it is a derivative of the MUP or MUP, which is the in-game name for the USP-9 In the Resident Evil 2 Remake, where it is wielded by Hunk in his 4th Survivor scenario, and in the remake of Resident Evil 3, where it is available from the post-game bonus shop. The MUP in both games features a two-tone finish, with the slide being silver and the frame being black. The SG-09R features the same finish, suggesting that in-universe, the USP-9 is only available as such. This is another difference between the SG-09R and its predecessor, which was mostly all silver, with wooden grips likely inspired by the Samurai Edge, which again is supposedly what Kendo originally offered Leon. The SG-09R instead features polymer grips, just like most modern pistols. However, despite the differences in their design, the silver slide and their roots in the USP-9 unites them. Basing the SG-09R on the MUP was honestly a stroke of genius, since it links it, and by extension, the remake of Resident Evil 4, to the original Resident Evil 4 and its Silver Ghost, and to the remakes of Resident Evils 2 and 3. Finally, for its design elements, the SG-09R features the word Kendo on the right side of its slide, which clearly references the man that custom built it. Another fact that unites both versions of the iconic pistol. In terms of stats, just like its predecessor, the SG-09R is a jack of all trades but master of none handgun that does not excel in any one category but is no slouch in any of them either, which makes it a reliable and dependable sidearm. It also still retains its exclusive upgrade that gives it 5 times critical hit rate, meaning that it once again rewards a skilled hand, and accurate shots can allow it to make up for having less damage than some of its peers. However, the SG-09R does have one advantage that its predecessor did not have. In the original Resident Evil 4, pretty much every weapon, including every handgun, had a laser sight, so you always had aiming assistance regardless of which pistol you chose to use. However, in the remake of Resident Evil 4, only the SG-09R, the Sentinel-9, and the FN-57, called Punisher in-game, can mount a laser sight. Therefore, in the remake, for those of us that want to have a laser sight on our pistol, the only 3 that allow it make for the most compelling choices. Like its original incarnation, the SG-09R is Leon's canonical sidearm, which he uses throughout the game. Though arguably, the SG-09R sees a lot more use than its predecessor in cutscenes, certainly from a mechanical point of view, since Leon performs a very cool brass check on it at one point, and is forced to clear a jammed cartridge in another. The moment when said jamming happens is also shown. And Leon even puts the pistol to very good use in an awesome scene where he shows off his marksmanship and the effectiveness of his handgun. Also, unlike its original incarnation, Leon does use the SG-09R in Mercenaries. So, in the end, all in all, in the remake, Kendo once again did a superb job with Leon's custom sidearm. He created yet another masterpiece, an exemplary showcase of custom gunsmithing. In every game, regardless of genre, every weapon on offer tends to be generic, with few exceptions. An MP5 will always be an MP5. An AK-47 will always be an AK-47. An M4 will always be an M4, etc. However, every now and then, a game that features a special and unique weapon comes around. A weapon that is fictional or customized in such a way that it stands out. It is not just another insert weapon name here. Instead, it is a signature weapon. One meant to represent and symbolize a specific group or individual that are often skilled and experienced to the point that nothing less than an exceptional weapon will suffice for them. Such weapons become inextricably linked to those that wield them, and to the games they are from. They become iconic arms that immediately evoke said quintessential characters and games who are so notable that the weapon they use and feature become almost as noteworthy and as instantly recognizable. The Silver Ghost ranks among such weapons. Just seeing it instantly brings Leon and Resident Evil 4 to mind. Two titans of pop culture and of the franchise they belong to. Ryomura Yoshin and Kendo and Leon in-game certainly knew what they were doing when designing a custom pistol fit for both an extremely adept individual and a perilous mission. They created a handgun that won't be forgotten anytime soon, and one that definitely belongs in the pantheon of iconic and unforgettable video game weapons. While it might be a ghost in name only, the memories of its greatness will certainly haunt you like one, and those that dare to stand before it will almost definitely end up as one. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.